The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday in March. I was asleep in my Seattle apartment when my phone lit up the darkness with my mother's name on the screen. I knew before I answered. You always know when a call comes at that hour. Nothing good happens at 2:47 in the morning. Mia, my mother's voice was barely recognizable through the sobbing. It's your father. There was a heart attack. He's gone, baby. He's gone. The world tilted sideways. My father, James Rodriguez, was only 58 years old. He'd been healthy, active, running his commercial landscaping company that he'd built from nothing over 30 years. We'd had dinner together just 3 days ago. He'd been laughing, telling stories, making plans to expand the business into Oregon. And now he was gone. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of funeral arrangements, family gathering at my parents' house in Tacoma, endless casseroles from neighbors, and my mother's devastating grief. I'd flown home immediately, leaving my marketing job in Seattle on indefinite bereavement leave. My younger brother Carlos was there too, home from college, both of us trying to hold our mother together while falling apart ourselves. On the fourth day, my father's lawyer, Mr. Henderson, came to the house. He was an older man who'd known Dad for 20 years, and his eyes were red-rimmed as he sat across from us in the living room. I'm so sorry for your loss, he began, his voice thick. James was a good man. One of the best I've ever known. My mother nodded, clutching tissues in her fist. I sat beside her, numb, still unable to process that Dad was really gone. We need to discuss the business, Mr. Henderson continued gently. Rodriguez Landscaping. James left very specific instructions in his will. I'd barely thought about the business. 20 employees, contracts all over Pierce County, equipment worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Dad's legacy. His life's work. Your mother inherits everything, of course, Mr. Henderson said. But James knew managing a landscaping company wasn't something she wanted to take on. So he made provisions. He pulled out a document, setting it on the coffee table between us. Mia, your father wanted you to take over as owner and CEO of Rodriguez Landscaping. He believed you had the business sense and the drive to keep his company going. He trusted you completely. I stared at him, my brain struggling to process the words. Me? But I work in marketing. I don't know anything about landscaping. You know about business, Mr. Henderson said firmly. You have your MBA. Your father talked about you constantly, how smart you were, how you turned around that struggling startup in Seattle. He believed in you, Mia. This was his wish. My mother squeezed my hand. You don't have to decide right now, Mija. But your father, he wanted this. He wanted his business to stay in the family. I looked at the document, at my father's signature at the bottom, and felt something crack open in my chest. He'd planned for this. Even though he'd never expected to die so young, he'd made sure his life's work would be protected. And he'd trusted me to do it. Okay, I heard myself say. I'll do it. The next morning, I drove to the Rodriguez Landscaping office, a modest building on the outskirts of Tacoma with the company's green and gold logo painted on the side. I'd been here dozens of times growing up, playing in Dad's office while he worked on bids, learning to drive in the parking lot, helping out during summer breaks. But I'd never been here as the owner. The office manager, a kind woman named Susan who'd worked for Dad for 15 years, met me at the door with tears in her eyes and a fierce hug. Your father was the best boss I ever had, she said. We're all devastated. But we're so glad you're here. The crew has been worried about what would happen to the company. She led me through the office, a reception area, a small conference room, 3 offices, and a large garage bay where equipment was stored. Photos of completed projects lined the walls. Certificates and awards. A picture of Dad shaking hands with the mayor at some event. My throat tightened. This was real. This was happening. Everyone's out on jobs right now, Susan explained. But they'll be back this afternoon for the weekly meeting. Your father always held them on Fridays at 3 p.m. Who runs the day-to-day operations? I asked. Susan's expression shifted, something uncomfortable crossing her face. That would be Connor. Connor Brennan. He's been the operations manager for 5 years. He oversees all the crews, manages the scheduling, handles client relations. I'd like to meet him. He's in his office. She hesitated. Mia, I should probably tell you. Connor's been different this week. Since your father passed. He's been making comments about the company's future. About changes. I just thought you should know. Something in her tone made my stomach twist. What kind of comments? Maybe you should just talk to him yourself. She led me down the hall to the largest of the 3 offices, the one that used to be Dad's but apparently Connor had claimed as his own. The door was open, and inside, a man in his late 30s sat at the desk, feet propped up, talking loudly on his phone. Yeah, man, I'm telling you, everything's about to change around here, he was saying, laughing. The old man's gone, and his widow sure as hell isn't going to run a landscaping company. This place will probably sell within a month, and when it does, I'm positioning myself as the obvious choice to take over. I've been running this operation for years anyway. Susan cleared her throat. Connor looked up, and his expression flickered, surprise, then annoyance, then a smooth smile. Let me call you back, he said into the phone, then stood. Well. Mia Rodriguez. Haven't seen you in 2 years? Sorry about your dad. Hell of a thing. The casual way he said it made my jaw clench. Hell of a thing. Like Dad had gotten a flat tire, not died. Connor, I said evenly. I'm here to discuss the company's operations. I'm taking over as owner and CEO. The smile froze on his face. Taking over? You? Yes. My father left the business to me. He laughed. Actually laughed. No offense, sweetheart, but what do you know about running a landscaping company? You're in marketing or something, right? This isn't selling social media ads. This is real work. Sweetheart. The condescension dripped from every word. I have an MBA and 7 years of business management experience, I said, keeping my voice level. I'm more than qualified to run this company. An MBA. He snorted. Cute. Listen, I've been running the day-to-day here for 5 years. Your dad was barely involved anymore, I handled everything. The crews, the clients, the operations. This company runs because of me. My father built this company over 30 years, I said quietly. And according to his will and the legal documents, I now own it. We'll be working together to ensure a smooth transition. Connor's expression darkened. He walked around the desk, crossing his arms, looking down at me with barely concealed contempt. He was tall, probably 6'2", and he was using his height to intimidate me. Here's the thing, he said, his voice low and sharp. I've got relationships with every major client. I know every crew member personally. I understand how this business operates from the ground up. You don't. You're the boss's daughter playing office because Daddy gave you his company in his will. My hands clenched at my sides. I'm not playing anything. This is my company now, and if you think I'm going to take orders from some MBA princess who doesn't know a hedge trimmer from a chainsaw, you're delusional. He stepped closer, and I could smell coffee on his breath. So here's my offer, you stay out of my way, let me keep running operations like I have been, and we'll all be fine. You can have the title, sit in the office, collect the profits. But the real work? That's mine. I stared at him, stunned by his audacity. My father wasn't even in the ground yet, and this man was trying to stage a coup. That's not how this is going to work, I said. Connor's smile turned cold. Then let me make this real simple for you, sweetheart. If you try to actually be the boss, if you try to give me orders, change how I run things, interfere with my operations, I will quit. And when I quit, I'm taking half the crew with me. We'll start our own company, and we'll take every client with us. Rodriguez Landscaping will be dead within 6 months. The threat hung in the air between us. He was serious. I could see it in his eyes, the arrogance, the certainty that he held all the cards. So what's it going to be? He asked, smirking. Are you going to be smart and stay out of my way? Or are you going to play boss and watch your daddy's company burn to the ground? I looked at him, at this man who'd worked for my father for 5 years, who'd been at his funeral 3 days ago with fake sympathy on his face, who was now threatening to destroy everything Dad had built unless I gave him control. And I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. Something that felt like my father's steel spine, his refusal to be pushed around, his fierce protection of what he'd built. I need to make some calls, I said quietly. I'll give you my answer by the end of the day. Connor's smirk widened. Smart girl. Take your time. Think about what's really best for the company. I walked out of his office, past Susan's concerned face, out to my car in the parking lot. And then I sat there, shaking with rage and grief and something else, determination. Connor thought he could bully me. Thought I'd cave because I was young, because I was a woman, because I was grieving. He thought I'd hand over my father's legacy just to avoid conflict. He had no idea who he was dealing with. I pulled out my phone and started making calls. To Mr. Henderson. To the company's accountant. To a business consultant I knew in Seattle. And slowly, carefully, I started building my strategy. Because if Connor Brennan wanted a war, I was about to show him what a Rodriguez did when someone threatened their family's legacy. And he was going to regret every single word he'd said. I spent the weekend digging through every document, every contract, every piece of information about Rodriguez Landscaping that I could find. Mr. Henderson brought over boxes of files from Dad's home office. The accountant, a woman named Patricia who'd handled the company's books for a decade, met me at a coffee shop and walked me through the financials. What I discovered was both enlightening and infuriating. Connor had been good at his job, the operations ran smoothly, the crews were efficient, clients were generally happy. But he'd also been systematically positioning himself as irreplaceable. He'd made himself the primary contact for every major client. He'd built personal relationships with the crew leaders, often taking them out for drinks and talking about when things change. He'd been preparing for this moment, anticipating my father's retirement or death, planning his takeover. But he'd also made mistakes. Big ones. Look at this, Patricia said, pointing to a line item in the expenses. Connor's been approving equipment purchases without proper authorization. Your father had a policy, anything over $5,000 needed his signature. Connor's been bypassing that for months. Is it fraudulent? I asked. Not technically. The equipment was for the company. But it shows a pattern of operating outside established protocols. And look here, she tapped another section. These entertainment expenses. Dinners, bars, golf outings. Connor's been charging thousands of dollars a month in client entertainment that your father never approved. I studied the numbers, my marketing brain analyzing the patterns. Connor had been running the company like it was already his, spending money freely, building his empire within Dad's business. What about the clients? I asked. He claims they're all his relationships. Patricia smiled grimly. The contracts are all with Rodriguez Landscaping, not with Connor personally. And I happen to know several of those clients. They were your father's relationships long before Connor ever showed up. James built those connections over decades. What about the crew? He says he can take half of them. He's probably talking about the crew leaders, 3 guys who've been here less time than Connor. But the core employees? The ones who've been here 10, 15, 20 years? They're loyal to your father's memory. And they're protected by employment contracts that include non-compete clauses. I sat back, processing all of this. Connor had been bluffing. Not entirely, he probably could cause some disruption if he left. But he didn't have the power he'd claimed. He'd been trying to intimidate me into surrendering control because he knew if I actually looked at the details, I'd see through his facade. What do you recommend? I asked Patricia. Fire him, she said bluntly. Today. He's insubordinate, he's been operating outside company policy, and he's actively threatening the business. You have cause, and you have the authority. Your father would have done it already if he'd known Connor was planning this. I thought about my father, about the stories he'd told me about building his business. How he'd started with nothing but a used truck and a lawn mower. How he'd worked 18-hour days, built relationships with clients through honesty and quality work, treated his employees with respect. How he'd never let anyone push him around or threaten what he'd built. What would Dad do? I already knew the answer. Monday morning, I arrived at the Rodriguez landscaping office at 7 a.m., an hour before the usual start time. Susan was already there, and her eyes widened when she saw me carrying a box of files. Is everything okay? She asked. It will be, I said. Can you call an emergency all-staff meeting for 8 a.m.? Everyone needs to be here, all the crew leaders, all the office staff, everyone. Connor won't like that. Monday mornings he usually. I don't care what Connor usually does. This is happening. She nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. I'll make the calls. By 8 a.m., the conference room was packed. 15 employees, including the 3 crew leaders Connor had likely been grooming, plus Susan and the 2 other office staff members. Connor arrived last, irritated at being summoned, his expression darkening when he saw me standing at the head of the table. What's this about? He demanded. We have jobs scheduled. We don't have time for. Sit down, Connor, I said quietly. Something in my voice made him pause. The room went silent. He sat, but his jaw was tight, his eyes hard. I looked around at the faces staring at me, some curious, some worried, some openly skeptical. These were people who'd worked for my father, some of them for decades. They deserved the truth. Thank you all for being here, I began. As you know, my father passed away unexpectedly last week. It's been the most difficult time of my life, and I know many of you are grieving too. My dad built this company over 30 years, and every single one of you was important to him. I saw nods, saw some eyes getting misty. Susan was dabbing at tears. My father left Rodriguez Landscaping to me in his will. I know some of you are concerned about what that means for the company's future. So I want to be very clear, I'm here to honor my father's legacy. I'm here to ensure this company continues to thrive. And I'm here to make sure every employee who has been loyal to this company is valued and protected. Connor shifted in his seat, his expression darkening. However, I continued, I've spent the past few days reviewing company operations, financials, and policies. And I've discovered some concerning issues that need to be addressed immediately. I opened the folder I'd brought, pulling out printed documents. Connor, last Friday, you made it clear that you believe you're the one who actually runs this company. You told me that if I tried to actually be the boss, you would quit and take half the crew with you. You claimed that without you, Rodriguez Landscaping would fail. The room erupted in murmurs. The crew leaders looked shocked. Susan's mouth fell open. Connor's face flushed red. That's not, you're taking it out of context. I'm not, I said calmly. Susan was standing right there. She heard you. But here's what you didn't know when you made that threat, I've been reviewing the company records. And I found a pattern of behavior that violates company policy and my father's explicit instructions. I pulled out the first document. Equipment purchases totaling $37,000 made without proper authorization. Company policy requires owner approval for any purchase over $5,000. You bypassed that policy repeatedly. Connor's face went from red to white. Those were necessary purchases for operations. That's not the point. The point is you deliberately violated established protocols. I pulled out another document. Entertainment expenses totaling over $40,000 in the past year. Dinners, golf outings, bar tabs, all charged to the company credit card without itemized justification or approval. Client entertainment is part of business. Connor stood up, his hands flat on the table. Your father knew I was building relationships. My father's entertainment expenses averaged $5,000 a year, I said, my voice cutting through his protests. You spent 8 times that amount in 12 months. That's not relationship building. That's personal indulgence on the company's dime. The room was dead silent. Every eye was on Connor, who was now visibly sweating. Furthermore, I continued, I've spoken with several of our major clients over the weekend. Contrary to your claims, they don't have personal loyalty to you. They have contracts with Rodriguez Landscaping. They've been working with my father for years, in some cases decades. Their relationships are with this company, not with you personally. This is bullshit, Connor spat. You're trying to make me look bad because you're scared I'm right. You can't run this company without me. Actually, I can. I looked around the room at the employees watching this confrontation unfold. I've also reviewed the employment contracts. Every crew leader, every long-term employee has a non-compete clause that prevents them from working for a competing landscaping company within Pierce County for 2 years after leaving Rodriguez Landscaping. So your threat to take half the crew and start your own company? That would result in immediate legal action and significant financial penalties. Connor's expression shifted from anger to panic. He clearly hadn't thought I'd checked the contracts. So here's my response to your ultimatum, I said, meeting his eyes directly. You asked me what kind of boss I was going to be. You wanted to know if I'd stay out of your way or play boss. Well, here's your answer, I'm not playing anything. I am the boss. This is my company. And I don't negotiate with employees who threaten to sabotage the business if they don't get their way. I pulled out one final document and slid it across the table. Connor Brennan, you're fired. Effective immediately. You have 1 hour to clear out your personal belongings from the office. Susan will escort you to ensure company property remains on site. You'll receive 2 weeks severance pay as per your employment contract, but you're not to contact any clients, any employees, or set foot on company property after today. The silence was absolute. Connor stared at the termination letter, his mouth working but no words coming out. You can't, he finally managed. You don't have the authority. I have complete authority. I'm the owner. And you violated company policy multiple times, operated outside your authority, and threatened to sabotage the business. Any one of those would be grounds for termination. You've given me all 3. Connor's face twisted with rage. He stood up so fast his chair fell backward. You're making a huge mistake. This company will fall apart without me. These guys, he gestured at the crew leaders, they're loyal to me, not to some princess who inherited a business she knows nothing about. I looked at the 3 crew leaders. Gentlemen, if anyone wants to leave with Connor, you're free to do so. However, please remember your non-compete agreements and consider that Rodriguez Landscaping has been providing steady work, good benefits, and fair treatment long before Connor arrived. The choice is yours. The 3 men looked at each other. The oldest one, a guy named Marcus who I recognized from childhood visits to the office, stood up. My heart sank. He was leaving. But instead of following Connor toward the door, Marcus turned to me. Miss Rodriguez, he said quietly. Your father was the best boss I ever had. He gave me a chance when I needed it, treated me with respect, paid me fairly. I don't know if you're going to be as good a boss as he was, but I'm willing to give you a chance to try. And anyone who talks about your daddy's company the way Connor just did? He doesn't belong here. The other 2 crew leaders nodded in agreement. Around the room, other employees were doing the same. Connor looked around, seeing his imagined allies abandoning him, and his face contorted. You'll regret this, he hissed at me. All of you. When this place falls apart, don't come crying to me. Get out, I said simply. Susan, please escort Mr. Brennan to his office to collect his things. Susan stood, her expression stern. Right this way, Connor. He stormed out, and we all heard him in his office, slamming things around. 20 minutes later, he left the building carrying a box, shooting me one final venomous glare before climbing into his truck and peeling out of the parking lot. When the sound of his engine faded, I turned back to the employees still sitting in the conference room. "I know this was dramatic," I said. "And I know some of you might be worried about what happens next. So let me be clear about my plans for Rodriguez Landscaping." I took a deep breath, channeling my father's strength. "This company will continue to operate with the same values my father built it on: quality work, fair treatment of employees, honest relationships with clients. I'm going to learn this business from the ground up. I'm going to make mistakes, and when I do, I need you to tell me. I want this to be a team effort." I looked at Marcus. "I'd like to promote you to operations manager, if you're interested. We can discuss the details later, but I need someone who knows the crews, knows the work, and shares my father's values." Marcus's eyes widened. Yes. I'd be honored. The rest of you, your jobs are secure. Your benefits stay the same. And I promise you this, I will work my ass off to make my father proud and to make sure Rodriguez Landscaping not only survives but thrives. My voice cracked slightly. My dad built something incredible here. Something worth fighting for. And I'm going to fight for it with everything I have. The room erupted in applause. People stood up, shaking my hand, some hugging me, voices overlapping with support and encouragement. That afternoon, I called every major client personally. I introduced myself, explained the transition, assured them that Rodriguez Landscaping would continue to provide the same excellent service they'd always received. Not one of them expressed concern. Several said they'd been worried about what would happen after Dad's death and were relieved to know his daughter was taking over. Connor's irreplaceable relationships had been a lie. The client's loyalty was to the company, to the quality of work, to the Rodriguez name. 6 months later, Rodriguez Landscaping was thriving. Marcus had proven to be an excellent operations manager, fair, knowledgeable, respected by the crews. We'd hired 2 new employees to replace the workload Connor had claimed only he could handle. Revenue was up 15%. Client satisfaction scores had actually improved. And I'd learned the business from the ground up, just like I'd promised. I spent time on job sites, learned about equipment and plants and irrigation systems, got to know every employee personally. I wasn't just playing boss. I was the boss. And I was damn good at it. One day, I was in the office when Susan came in with a strange expression on her face. "Connor's here," she said. "He wants to talk to you." My stomach tightened, but I nodded. "Send him in." Connor walked in looking very different from the arrogant man who'd tried to bully me 6 months ago. He was thinner, tired-looking, his confidence deflated. "Mia," he said, and there was no condescension in his voice now. "I wanted to talk to you." "Okay," I said neutrally. Look, I was wrong. About everything. I was arrogant and disrespectful, and I underestimated you completely." He shifted uncomfortably. "I tried to start my own landscaping company, but it turns out actually running a business is a lot harder than I thought. And without Rodriguez's reputation, without the established clients and equipment and crew, I couldn't make it work. I'm closing down next month." I didn't say anything, just waited. "I'm here to apologize," he said. "What I did was wrong. The way I spoke to you, the way I threatened you while you were grieving your father, it was inexcusable. You've built something impressive here. Your dad would be proud." I studied him for a long moment. The apology seemed genuine, but the wounds were still there. "Thank you for saying that," I said finally. "I hope you learned something from this experience." I did. He stood to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, you proved me wrong about everything. You're not playing boss. You are the boss. And you're better at it than I ever was." After he left, I sat at my desk, Dad's old desk that I'd finally moved into, and looked at the photos on the wall. Dad at various job sites over the years. Dad shaking hands with clients. Dad with his arm around me at my college graduation, pride shining in his eyes. "I did it, Dad," I whispered. "I protected what you built. And I'm going to keep making you proud." My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus: "Just landed the Riverside Mall contract. Biggest job we've ever had. Rodriguez Landscaping is officially big time now." I smiled, tears blurring my vision, and texted back, "Dad would be thrilled. Let's celebrate with the whole crew." Because that's what we were now, a crew, a team, a family. Connor had tried to break us with threats and intimidation. Instead, he'd given me the chance to prove that my father's legacy was stronger than one man's ego. And that legacy would live on, not because of fear or control, but because of respect, quality work, and the unbreakable determination of a daughter who refused to let her father's life's work die with him. Rodriguez Landscaping wasn't just surviving. It was thriving. And Connor Brennan? He'd learned the hard way that underestimating a grieving daughter was the biggest mistake of his career.